Wait! I'm a what? Written by Artina Blackcharm. Chapter 3. Storm Pickup Service. Summary. The Danny Phantom Pickup Service also promises that no matter the size, the package will always reach the destination. Arkham Asylum was no paradise, never truly viewed as an asylum more than a prison. So one wasn't exactly happy to be there. Violin Jones decided that it was his time to go. Sick of the looks up from the other inmates and the tension that followed you down the halls behind these walls, it was supposed to be believed that the criminals and those not exactly mentally stable were secure. They were being treated with the hope of not reoffending should they ever get out, was the supposed promise of the institution. Except that wasn't the case. Yes, there were some residents of the asylum that could use the treatment, and would actually probably be able to be released, but no effort was truly being done for it. The man with a tumor in his brain that made him feel less and less every day was left to sit in a room with a small window. The woman who had snapped after years in an unsafe place was never able to stop watching out for more threats. There were many like them. And then there were the ones most known in the news. The rogues who went against Batman and lost, usually as temporary residents due to the bad habit of people finding ways to escape. Violin had bidden his time. Healing after the last operation he gotten involved in went sideways. He hadn't even put up much of a fight when they had locked him up, too tired to bother. He let himself simply watch the other residents of this fine establishment, which was more than enough to keep the others away. Although Joker kept trying to draw him into a conversation, telling him in a sing-song voice about ways to get back at Batsy. The damn clown was annoying, and Warren had been glad they sent him to isolation for breaking the table after Joker began offering to give him a scar or two to pretty up his face. It was quiet. One could almost say peaceful. Warren had sat there and breathed in the stale air before focusing his eyes on the spot of the wall he had hidden the last time he was there. He could tell that a storm was coming. He got to work. From his spot in the water, Valerian watched as the lights of Arkham Asylum got dimmer and dimmer. The only sound was the rain. The flooding happening around Gotham made sure the streets were empty. Everyone was holed up inside, and the rain made it hard to see anything, much less in the poorly lit streets. Not that it proved to be an issue for Valerian. He could see just fine. He made his way towards the East End, but skipped around the bordery of Crime Alley, not wanting to take any chances with Hood or go more towards the Brownery where shit always went down. Instead, he settled for an area off to the side. It was a spare choice of shops and a run-down neighborhood spanning a few blocks. He found himself in an alley and sat for a while, almost a doze, until something walked past him, and he looked to see a cat. It paused when it saw him, but he made no move. The idea of possibly eating the cat crossed Valerian's mind in that dirty alley. Arkham hardly had government meals, but the thing looked so pathetic, and Valerian wasn't eager to add cat eater to his repertoire. Never mind the fact that someone believed he regularly ate people. Unaware of his thoughts, the cat quickly moved towards the opening of the alley and hid underneath the dumpster. It was much later when he got the sense that something was coming closer. He watched as a kid came into view, soaking wet, and looking like they'd fall at the slightest bit of wind, except they stood fine in the rain, and crouched down to the cat. He found out that the cat's name was Cookie and belonged to a Miss Junie. Waylon had waited for the kid to pick up the cat and leave, but instead the teen spoke out loud. apparently aware he had been there, and not keen on getting attacked. Not that Valron had any plans to do anything of this sort. He crept out of the darkness of the alley far enough for the kid to be able to see him. He let out a rumble from his throat to let them know just who they were in the presence of. He waited for a scream and fear as he towered over them, except the kid kept staring at him, still holding Cookie. Then the team moved. He expected them to pull out a knife or something that most people around the area had on them, but they didn't. They just kept petting Cookie, as if the cat was worse off than they were in their wet, dripping clothes. They stared. Vaughn Jones, Killer Croc, wasn't a stranger to stares. Back home in Tampa, Florida, he grew up being stared at. He'd been paid to be stared at when he joined the sideshow carnival where he got his name. Even when he came to Gotham, he was stared at, despite all the odd figures around the city. Mullen got to know all types of stares, ones filled with disgust, fear, anger, disapproval, greed, and eyes swirling with all the types of ways to get the most use out of him. In the rain, blue eyes stared at him. They seemed cold, in the sense that there was a slight chill in the mornings. Something normal, and you just went on about your day. When they tilted their head, it reminded Vaughn of cats and other animals. A few birds came to mind. He listened, as they asked that he not mess with anyone in the area, even going so far as to say that he'd get the same in return. Valron resisted the urge to laugh and tried to remember the last time someone spoke to him so politely. The offer sounded genuine, enough that he gave a grunt of acknowledgement that seemed to satisfy the kid. He watched the scrawny teen casually turn the bag on Killer Croc and walk away. That night, Valron found a condemned building and settled in, wondering if he'd seen the kid again. He got his answer 2 days later when he heard someone coming inside the decrepit building. Though they stopped from going any deeper, a small figure came into view. The dim light from outside exposed an odd-looking silhouette that consisted of a small round head, a large boxy torso, and very small legs sticking at the bottom. But then there was a familiar voice ring out. It was the kid. As he stared longer and slightly shifted to get a better view, he slowly realized that this time the teen finally decided to wear a coat, though obviously not one in his size at all. Apparently, they had come by to give him his share for returning Cookie the cat, the payment, a chicken salad sandwich from Miss Junie. The whole time the teen had been polite, even warning Valron about the storm and flooding as if it would prove an issue. When they left, Valron followed and watched again as they walked off into the empty street alone. It became a repeating thing as the storm kept on. Every day the teen in a 2 big raincoats stopped by with a sandwich and news about ongoings of the area, seeming not to mind a 7-foot crocodile man watching from the shadows, and not saying a word. Valron didn't do anything to make them stop either. Miss Junie's sandwiches were better than anything he'd eaten at Arkham. Also, the kid knew a lot. Valron knew that the weather reports were probably saying the storm would continue, but he knew it was dying down if his senses were right. Apparently, the kid could also tell. They also knew it was going to get cold soon, and cops were making rounds. That's what made Valron go out to find a new, more permanent spot. He hoped that, considering the storm was still said to be going strong, he was less likely to run into anyone. Valron wasn't exactly known as one to have a lot of good luck. Then he was strolling on rooftops, as one does after helping fixing the AC on the roof, when he heard it. Gunshots had become background noise for him, but he could tell it was closer by, too close. He picked up speed and made his way towards the source of the sound. Worried that it was in the direction of Crime Alley, Danny really didn't want to fight someone angry about their hunt. But luckily, when he came across the scene of a gunfight, it was still outside the other's hunt. From the top of the rooftops, Danny looked down and saw chaos in the street. What looked like 3 different groups were taking cover and shooting at each other. He could hear the glass breaking of a fortunately empty building, and broken down cars abandoned on the street, taking most of the barrage of bullets. It inked him, and then he felt his core grow more uneasy as one of the groups tried to move further away from Crime Alley and ergo more into what was becoming his hunt. He didn't recognize the group. No one in the neighborhood had mentioned any group residing in the area. His attention was drawn away from trying to figure out who they were when he heard a familiar rumble. There was a small explosion, and the street was doused with a flash of light. Danny watched as a familiar large-scale figure crashed into the side of a building. Though, unlike the other times he saw them, they didn't remain quiet. A hiss that reminded Danny of Princess Dora came out of a sharp-toothed mouth as they lunged at the offending person. A yell was heard along with a quick muttering of, "Oink! Get that freak! Use the fucking gas, you idiot!" The words made Danny bristle, and he was reminded of his makeshift deal with the stranger. Then he had found the stranger in his area. He had told him not to mess with anyone, and they complied. He checked up on them. He offered them space. He was watching them get fucking shot at and called a freak. Then he saw these 3 men by the abandoned car pull something out that looked like a small grenade. The impact of jumping off the building didn't faze Danny. As he made his way to the group of only 3 men, he tightened his grip on the ridge he had been carrying. The men weren't even able to get a sound out before he knocked them unconscious and grabbed a hold of the grenade. He put the wrench away and pulled their bodies from the rest of the fight and further away from his hunt before running back into the fray. Apparently doing his short little escapade, the group that had been trying to get deeper into his hunt ran into the ones who were being chased by the stranger. Already there seemed to be a trail of men with different levels of injuries littering the streets. Then he moved a few of them so they didn't drown in the water of the road. When he got closer, he was able to focus on what was being in the group of 5 men was saying. "Nay, wrong. You said you had it handled, but those other fuckheads showed up and now our product is gone," a man was yelling at another who had a gun pointed at the stranger. "And just what the fuck is the free?" Another low hiss was heard, and the other man fired. His stance reminded Danny of a cop. He had a feeling that these were the cop Tick and Track warned him about, though no sort of uniform was seen. He was reminded how Eric did say that most cops were corrupted in East End. The stranger Danny gave sandwiches to didn't seem too affected by the gunshots, and instead charged. It was impressive how they barreled through the onslaught of bullets, pushing through enough to toss one man down the street and heading towards the next that was closest. Though that didn't stop, something smaller hit the stranger's face and burst into a cloud of gas. The falling roar was loud enough to send ripples in the water, flooding the street. The sound echoed in Danny's ears, muffling the cheers and laughter coming from the men. Danny ran, letting his hand pick up a falling gun, while the other created some ice to cover the grenade lightly. He crept along the buildings, shadows, and tossed the explosive after pulling the pin. He threw it far enough that it wouldn't kill the men, but close enough that the following explosion, with his eyes as sharpened, blew them back. As for his eyes, his control of it was the only thing that kept it from fatally injuring them. He ignored their sounds of pain and concern at the cuts from the eyes on their arms and legs. Instead, he had it force the scaled stranger that was hunched on the ground, with a tail Danny hadn't noticed before thrashing behind them. He tried to talk to them, but at the sound of his voice the stranger let out another roar and swept out an arm. It would have hit Danny if he hadn't ducked in time. The same thing happened on the second attempt. "Alright, note to self, no talking." They seemed to calm down when he didn't speak. Then he tried to inspect them quickly. He looked for any sign of injury and didn't find any. But what he was fully aware of was the wild anger and fear that seemed to be wafting off of them. It reminded him of the incident with Davison. He tried to project reassurance, but the stranger only got tensed up more when the men started to get up again. Then he let himself bristle in frustration for a moment before getting into motion. Quicker than he could be swatted away, Danny was hefting the 7-foot figure up on his back. At first, there had been some struggling, but when he didn't do anything other than secure his hold and keep projecting reassurances with his ghost aura until it stopped. Though the two of them were both wary of the men down the street, then he let himself smile at the sight of the cuts he caused. "What the fuck?" one man exclaimed when he looked in Danny's direction. The others turned to look at those words and made a grab for their guns, except Danny was already pointing the gun he found and shooting at the streetlight nearest to him, covering him and the stranger in darkness. He trained his gun at the men and shot at the cop's hand that was beginning to aim in their direction. A scream and a splash of water followed. Then he watched as the man clutched the hand to his chest and let his eyes dart to the other 4 men. They seemed to be staring at him and the stranger on his back. He could sense their fear growing. "Good. Get out!" He watched as they ran. Once Danny felt them no longer in his hunt, he put the safety back on the gun. He made sure it was secure and then moved the stranger on his back into a better position. He paused when noticing they were unconscious. Then he breathed a sigh of relief, though still projecting reassurance and calm. "You sleep tight. I will find you a better place to sleep this off," he said to the unconscious person on his back. Then he walked as the rain died, hoping that whatever dreams the stranger had were peaceful. That night, a few corrupted cops went home without making reports after shootout by a crime alley. None of them were eager to explain their involvement or show any connection to the group that had been there to move their supply of drugs. None of the cops or men on the other side of the law were exactly eager to do anything with whatever thing had told them to get out. They hadn't even caught sight of it really, other than the movement in the corner of their eye. It had easily knocked out several other men, almost mocking them that they could have been easily killed by it before they realized it. They seemed lucky that it seemed more focused on Killer Croc. They wondered if it was something like Killer Croc, though not completely the same. It had sounded human. Its voice had cut through the rain with ease and awoke unease when the words reached them. Where Killer Croc was known for his presence and deafening roar, whatever this was had been silent, waiting while keeping its eyes on them, waiting for a reason to put another bullet through them within a second. It was an easy decision to not give them another reason and to leave. All of them were eager to get away from something with bright eyes, even in the middle of a storm. Martin was talking to his buddies, Pentry and Nathan. All 3 of them were bunched up together with 2 of Miss Junie's blankets spread on them, when there was a telltale knock on the door of the building. "You think he has come with another blanket?" Paddy asked, fiddling with the stray string from the current blanket he was covered with. Martin got up from their makeshift pile. "Wouldn't be surprised. It seems Miss Junie has stocked up on them over the years, and just finally has a delivery boy." He stretched, letting his back make a couple of pops that always made Adrian wince before heading to the door. He knew several eyes were on him. Most of the homeless folk liked Danny, but not everyone was exactly most talkative bunch. Joe and Biff, who were sitting by the radio, almost rarely ever spoke to anyone, not that Danny seemed to mind. He was an odd kid. That thought was only supported when Martin opened the doors of the building to the sight of a hunched-over Danny carrying something that had to be an unconscious Killer Croc on his back. Danny smiled, and someone managed to pull out a hand from under his too big raincoat. "Miss Shun gave me another blanket for you guys." Martin could only take it and move aside when Danny began to walk inside, seemingly unaware of how everyone froze at his entrance. Instead, he simply turned, still smiling. "Hey, sorry for the interruption. The storm is actually coming down, but it is gonna get a bit cold. I'll make sure to get more blankets tomorrow and any other supplies if you give me a list," he said. "Bright eyes," Adrian called out, easily catching Danny's attention. The man almost looked unsure as he spoke. "You know you're carrying Killer Croc, right? The guy that should be in Arkham right now after some robbery and fighting the bat a few months ago." They watched as Danny looked pensive for a moment, unbothered by the wet and almost 40-pound rogue on his back. None of them could see any irritation in him at being questioned. "Actually, I didn't know that," Danny answered calmly. "Good to know. But I'm sort of paying them back in a way. Got caught up in some dumb stuff down by the road and street and the beginning of Crime Alley from some dudes not around here." A few of them tensed at the news. "You alright?" Adrian asked. "I'm fine." Danny waved his hand, and somehow Killer Croc still seemed stable and secure on the teen's back. "You know me. Just gotta set up the big guy in one of the rooms upstairs. He won't bother you, so don't worry." With that, they all watched as Danny walked towards the stairs and began making his way to the next floor. The whole time, Killer Croc was unmoving, on his back, tail dragging behind them. It was a chuckle that brought their attention away from the stairwell, and they looked at Patty, whose chuckles turned more into a giggle. "Now what, do pray tell, is so funny, Patty?" Martin asked, placing his gloved hands on his hip. Patty just seemed to giggle some more before stopping herself with a smile that showed a chipper tooth from a fright 3 years ago. She asked, "What do you think Bright Eyes picked up first, the blanket or the rogue?"